Hello and welcome to the FATBOSS guide to Garothi Worldbreaker on normal and heroic in Antorus, the Burning Throne.
Yes, this first boss is very simple, but it is deadly if you do not pay attention to the mechanics. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it and talk about the tanks first. So the boss will be marking the tanks with a 5-second debuff. You want the off tank to taunt whilst the debuff tank runs away, as the boss will throw missiles towards that tank every second for 5 seconds after the initial debuff expires. If you run away from the boss, you can avoid the missiles as they do have a set speed in which they travel, whereas if you just stand there, you'll take a ton of damage and be knocked up for each missile that hits you. It's a good idea to have the tanks stand on the left hand side of the room whilst the raid leaves that left side of the room completely clear for the tanks to run down for each set of missiles. And the tanks will have to deal with these bombardment missiles for the rest of the fight.
Now for the raid to deal with is two abilities, Decimation and Annihilation. Annihilation will mark a bunch of areas in the encounter space, and after a few moments these will explode, dealing very large damage to the entire raid. However, if a player stands within them, they'll take the damage instead, and this damage is split with anyone else within the zone. So as soon as this ability is cast and circles start to populate the room, every single player should go and soak a circle, with melee players focusing primarily on ones near the boss, and range going for ones that are further away. Ideally you'll want at least 2 players per zone, but if you are at full health you should be able to solo them. As for Decimation, this is a 5-second long debuff that will be applied to non-tank players. When the debuff expires, circles will appear on the ground and will explode another 5 seconds later. This does massive damage to anyone in the circle, whilst dealing a much smaller amount of damage to all players out of the circle. Players with a debuff just need to move away from the raid, drop their debuff, and then immediately stack back up to help healers do their thing. You'll want to make sure that these debuffs time out on the right hand side of the room rather than the left, because you don't want to block the tanks. After you've got the hang of dealing with all those 3 abilities, once the boss reaches 65% on heroic or 60% on normal mode, he'll no longer cast any of these abilities and he'll start up his Apocalypse drive. This is a channel which deals ticking damage to the raid, whilst also leaving large lines on the ground on heroic that deal a burst of damage to you when they explode, so you've got to make sure that you move from them. Now if the Apocalypse drive channel goes on for too long, he'll flat out one-shot the raid, so you need to interrupt it. This is done by destroying one of the 2 weapons that have now revealed themselves on the boss's back. Killing the Annihilator will remove the Annihilation ability from the encounter, and killing the Decimator will remove the Decimation ability from the encounter. The weapon that isn't destroyed will be healed back to full health and will now start casting its abilities more frequently, so you'll have either more zones spawn or you'll have more debuffs applied to the raid. We highly recommend that you kill the Annihilator first, as dealing with multiple Decimation abilities is really easy to deal with, and we'll show you how that's done in just a second. Once you've killed the Annihilator, the Apocalypse drive cast will stop, and the boss will begin to cast Eradication. This deals a massive amount of damage to the raid, however it does drop off with distance. So the moment that the weapon is killed, you'll want to run towards the back of the room just to survive this hit, and this is where you want to use a first set of damage reduction healing cooldowns. Now if you don't have a mobile tank that can get back to the boss very quickly after the cast, you might want to leave a tank close to the boss and instead just use some form of large damage reduction. This is so they can pick up the boss as he reactivates after a couple of seconds after the cast, otherwise he's just going to go and slap some melee DPS. Once the eradication is over, the boss will gain 2 buffs, one which is just a flat 20% damage increase, while the other just deals ticking damage to the group. The healers will now need to keep the raid topped up throughout the rest of the fight, which is easy as you'll be stacked, as you now only have to deal with a Decimation.
Now before the pull, you want to set up 2 markers in melee that are spread apart a little further than the size of the Decimation targeting circles. You want the entire raid to regroup on one of these markers. As soon as the Decimation debuffs have dropped to the floor, you want everyone to move as a group to the other marker. This keeps everyone stacked, ensuring that nobody gets hit by the Decimation zones, whilst also helping out your healers. Although this damage is pretty high, there is ample time to top people between each Decimation, and there's no need to panic use any healing cooldowns. Alternatively, during this phase you can just wing it. It works, but it's a little bit messy. Doing it this way is far cleaner. When the boss reaches 35% health on heroic or 20% on normal, he'll recast the Apocalypse drive, so you want to kill off the remaining weapon whilst dodging the lines on the floor on heroic mode. Once this weapon is dead, you'll once again need to run away for the eradication just to survive the hit. You want to use a second set of damage reduction cooldowns to reduce the damage of the hit, whilst this is also a really good time for any leftover personal cooldowns. Once the Apocalypse drive is over, the boss will gain another stack of the 20% damage increase, as well as start dealing even more ticking damage to the raid. As the final weapon is dead, the boss will now only be casting Fell Bombardment at the tanks. You just want to stack up and nuke the boss whilst the healers counter the incoming ticking damage from the buff the boss has gained. On Heroic, you'll have the surging fell lines remain throughout the rest of the fight. You just need to make sure that you dodge these whilst trying to remain as grouped up as possible just to help out your healers.
But that's it, it's a very simple encounter. If you want to know more about this fight and read up on some of the mythic changes, or just have a handy written guide on the other screen whilst raiding, then go check out our written guide over on Wowhead. The link for that is in the description below. If this guide helped you out, then please do throw us down a like, it helps us out a lot. But if you'd like to help us out even further, then do consider becoming a supporter over on our Patreon page. A big thank you to all the people that do support us over there. You make all this possible, you guys are absolutely awesome. And we shall see you all in the next guide.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.